In the heart of Burkina Faso, behind grey concrete walls and barbed wire, stood Koa Prison, a place where hope went to die. For decades, it had been a symbol of fear, corruption, and despair. But on this particular Sunday morning, something extraordinary was about to unfold. No one recognized him. Not the prison guards, not the inmates, not even the warden. As Ibrahim Traoré, the transitional leader of Burkina Faso, disguised himself as an ordinary prisoner named Moussa Dio. His mission: to uncover the horrifying truth hidden within those suffocating walls. The heavy iron gates of Koa Prison creaked open, and a voice barked, "Move forward! Hurry up!" The guard at the main gate didn't bother looking closely at the new arrival. Ibrahim kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. He blended seamlessly into the crowd of prisoners with his stubble-covered face, disheveled hair, and tattered clothes. Nothing about his posture, speech, or gaze hinted that he was actually the most powerful man in the country. His reason for entering Koa Prison was simple, yet dangerous. For months, official reports claimed everything was normal. No problems, conditions improving. Yet anonymous letters painted a different picture. Torture, starvation, missing prisoners, and mysterious deaths. Two realities existed, but only one could be true. Ibrahim knew there was only one way to find out. He had to see it with his own eyes. Ibrahim's first hours in Koa were no different from any other newcomer's experience. A stained, old prison uniform replaced his disguise, and he was assigned to cell block C7, the most feared section of the prison. As he sat on the lower bunk of his filthy bed, the stench of sweat and decay filled the air. The thin blanket offered little comfort, and the pillow felt like stone beneath his head. Suspicious glances came from every corner of the cell block. Every new face was a potential threat here. "Hey, new guy," called out a deep voice from across the room. It belonged to Bari, a towering figure with cold, calculating eyes. He was the most influential inmate in cell block C7, deciding who lived and who died. "How'd you end up here?" "A store robbery," Ibrahim replied calmly, fixing his gaze on Bari. "An unsuccessful robbery," Bari chuckled bitterly. "You think luck wasn't on your side? In here, there's no such thing as luck." "What about yours?" Ibrahim asked, his curiosity genuine. "What brought you down here?" Bari leaned forward, his smile fading. "Little man, I'm not just another prisoner. 15 years I've spent in this hellhole. Murder, theft, everything. My real crime? Getting caught." As evening fell, the dim light revealed horrors Ibrahim couldn't have imagined. From the corner bunk came a weak moan, full of pain. A young man lay trembling, his body frail and skeletal. Sweat drenched his face and fever burned in his eyes. "What happened to him?" Ibrahim whispered to the inmate beside him. "That's Gaspar," said an older prisoner sadly. "He was beaten by the guards 2 weeks ago. They never treated his broken ribs. Now infection's eating him alive." "Doctor? Medicine?" Ibrahim asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. The men laughed bitterly. "No doctor here, son. If you get sick, you either recover or you die. Guards don't care." When morning came, the first shock hit Ibrahim hard. Before the cell doors opened, guards entered, heading straight for Gaspar's bunk. The young man was now motionless. "Another one gone," said head guard Bolat indifferently. "Get him out." 2 guards dragged Gaspar's lifeless body away, as if disposing of trash. Rage swelled inside Ibrahim, but he forced himself to remain still. Showing anger meant punishment and possibly death. Later that day, Bolat scanned the cell block, his eyes stopping on Ibrahim. "You," he said, pointing. "Kitchen duty tomorrow. Be ready." That night, Bari pulled Ibrahim aside. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "There's a special room here. Prisoners go in, but they either never return or come back broken. Watch yourself." What awaited Ibrahim in the kitchen? Would he survive long enough to uncover the truth, or become another victim of Koa Prison's secrets? The prison kitchen was a grim, chaotic space that reeked of decay and desperation. It was here that Ibrahim Traoré, still disguised as Musa, Dio, found himself assigned to chop rotten vegetables under the watchful eyes of indifferent guards. The air was thick with the stench of spoiled produce, and rusted equipment lined the counters like relics of neglect. As he worked, Traoré observed everything: the inadequate supplies, the filthy conditions, and the stark contrast between what prisoners ate and what the guards consumed. "These vegetables are rotten," Traoré whispered to an old prisoner beside him, gesturing toward the pile of decaying greens. The man laughed bitterly. "These aren't for us, son. That cauldron over there, that's where they cook our food." Traoré turned his head slightly and saw another cook preparing meals at a separate cauldron. Fresh meat sizzled on pans. Bread loaves were stacked neatly nearby, and steam rose from pots filled with hearty stew. "What is he cooking?" Traoré asked quietly. "The guard's food," the old prisoner replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "They eat meat, we eat bones. They eat bread, we eat mold. That's how it works here." This revelation gnawed at Traoré. He had suspected corruption, but seeing it so blatantly displayed before him made his blood boil. Yet he forced himself to stay calm. Anger would only invite suspicion. That night, back in cell block C7, Barry pulled Traoré aside. "Come, new guy," he said gruffly. "I've got things to tell you." They moved to a corner of the dimly lit cell block, away from prying ears. Barry's face was uncharacteristically serious, his usual bravado replaced by something akin to fear. "There's a special room," Barry whispered urgently. "Prisoners who go in either never return or come back broken. Torture devices, electric shocks. It's hell in there. If anyone suspects you're causing trouble, that's where they'll send you." Traoré listened intently, committing every word to memory. "And then there's the bribes," Barry continued. "Decent food, medicine, protection, even staying alive costs money. Without family or funds, you're finished." "How long has it been like this?" Traoré asked, his tone measured. "Always," Barry muttered darkly. "But it's gotten worse since Warden Cabaret took charge last year." On the third day, tragedy struck again. Another young prisoner named Suleiman died after being dragged to the infamous special room. Unlike Gaspar, whose death had been caused by untreated injuries, Suleiman's fate was tied directly to the prison's corrupt system. "He didn't have money," Barry explained later that evening when the others slept. "His family couldn't pay the bribe, so they tortured him, electric shocks, beatings, starvation. When they finally brought him back, he was already gone." Traoré clenched his fists beneath the thin blanket. Each story added weight to the burden he carried. What he had witnessed so far was horrifying enough, but now he understood the depth of depravity within Koa Prison. The next morning, dread settled in Traoré's stomach when two guards approached. "Him during breakfast? You!" one of them barked, pointing at Traoré. "Warden wants to see you. Let's go." As they dragged him toward the dreaded special room, Traoré's mind raced. Had someone uncovered his identity, or was this merely routine intimidation? Either way, he knew what awaited him inside wouldn't be pleasant. When Traoré stepped into the room, his suspicions were confirmed. Bloodstains marred the walls, and torture devices gleamed ominously in the dim light. Standing in the center was Warden Cabaret, immaculately dressed, his expression cold and merciless. "So, Musa Dio, or whoever you are, we've heard you asking too many questions," Cabaret sneered. "Let's see if you're worth keeping around." What would happen next? Would Traoré reveal his true identity and risk everything, or find another way to survive? The special room was a nightmare come to life. Bloodstains covered the walls, and torture devices gleamed ominously in the dim light. Standing in the center of the room was Warden Cabaret, immaculately dressed, his expression devoid of mercy. His eyes locked onto Ibrahim Traoré, still disguised as Moussa Dio with cold calculation. "So, Moussa Dio, or whoever you are, we've heard you asking too many questions," Cabaret sneered. "Let's see if you're worth keeping around." Trare remained calm, his face betraying nothing. He had spent days preparing for this moment, knowing it might come. Now, he needed to play his cards carefully. "To survive," Trare replied. Evenly, fixing his gaze on Cabaret, Cabaret leaned forward, his smile widening. "To survive here, you need money. Do you have family? Friends? Anyone who can pay?" Trare stayed silent, letting the tension build. What Bari had told him was true. This place ran on bribes, extortion, and fear. Every prisoner was caught in a web of corruption that drained them of everything they had, leaving only despair behind. Cabaret gestured toward the electric shock devices and batons lining the walls. "Look, let me explain how things work here. You either pay or you suffer. It's simple." "How much?" Trare asked, his voice steady despite the rage simmering inside him. "For someone like you?" Cabaret smirked. "Let's say 500,000 CFA. That's more than a year's income for most Burkinabés." "And if I don't pay?" Trare pressed, his tone laced with quiet defiance. Cabaret pointed to the torture devices. "Then the fun begins." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Trare knew he couldn't delay any longer. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic object, a transmitter given to him by the Secret Service before entering Koa Prison. Pressing a button, he activated it. "What are you doing?" Cabaret demanded, his confidence faltering. "Calling for help," Trare said coolly, "and trust me, they're very close." Before Cabaret could react, the door burst open, but instead of guards rushing in, fully equipped special forces stormed the room, armed and masked. They were Trare's loyal team, stationed nearby in case of emergencies. "What is this?" Cabaret stammered, stumbling backward. "Who are these men?" Trare stood slowly, his posture changing entirely. Gone was the slouched demeanor of Moussa Dio. In its place stood Ibrahim Trare, the transitional leader of Burkina Faso. His back was straight, his eyes sharp and commanding. "Warden Cabaret," Trare said firmly, "I am Ibrahim Trare, and you are under arrest." Cabaret's face turned pale. His legs trembled as he tried to process what was happening. "Impossible," he whispered hoarsely. "Warden Cabaret," Trare continued, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "I've heard countless allegations about you and your guards. Torture, extortion, mistreatment, even deaths. And now I've seen it all with my own eyes." Masked guards restrained Cabaret, but the man offered no resistance. He was frozen in shock, unable to comprehend how his world had unraveled so quickly. But we were following orders," Cabaret stammered desperately. "From the ministry, from the government." "I am the government now," Trare replied, his voice firm yet controlled. "And the only order I gave was justice and dignity for all Burkinabés." Outside, the sound of helicopters filled the air. The prison was now completely surrounded, ensuring no one could escape. "I appointed you as prison minister," Trare said, turning to leave the room. "But seeing the hell you created, I think it's fitting that I make you my first prisoner." Trare walked through the corridors of Koa Prison. Chaos erupted around him. Guards dropped their weapons and surrendered, some trying to flee but failing. When the door to cell block C7 opened, the prisoners looked up in astonishment. Standing before them was no longer the unassuming Moussa Dio, but a leader who commanded respect. Bari stepped forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You, Bari?" began, his voice trailing off. "Yes," Trare confirmed. "Every story I've heard from you, Every word you've spoken, it matters now. The time has come for justice." Over the next hours, Traore examined every corner of the prison. What he saw shook him deeply: torture rooms, starving prisoners, and inhumane conditions. He documented each case meticulously: the names of prisoners, the crimes of guards, the atrocities committed within these walls. By Saturday morning, Traore issued an order. "Everyone, prisoners, guards, administrators, gather in the prison yard." One of the Secret Service agents approached him cautiously. "Sir, will there be punishment? Executions?" Traore shook his head. "No. There will be justice, and justice is far more powerful than vengeance." When Saturday arrived, the prison yard buzzed with tension. On one side stood weak, filthy prisoners, their faces etched with years of suffering. On the other side huddled frightened guards and prison administrators. Ministers and state officials accompanied Traore as he addressed the crowd. "Today, Burkina Faso must make a choice," Traore began, his voice resonating across the yard. "Will we stand with the oppressed or with the oppressors? Are we not guilty if we simply watch injustice unfold as spectators?" A heavy silence fell over the gathering. Some guards bowed their heads in shame, while others stared at the ground, unable to meet anyone's gaze. In the eyes of the prisoners, however, flickered both hope and fear. "I am closing Koa Prison today," Traore declared. "This structure of shame will be demolished, and a rehabilitation center will take its place. Warden Cabaret and his accomplices will face fair trials, not your version of justice, but real justice." As Traore outlined his plans to provide medical care, proper nutrition, and fair trials for all prisoners, the crowd erupted into murmurs. Would the prisoners believe him? Could such sweeping reforms truly transform a system built on corruption and cruelty? What would happen next? Would the changes Traore envisioned bring redemption or resistance? Weeks after Ibrahim Traoré's daring infiltration of Koa Prison, the once feared institution was unrecognizable. The gray concrete walls that had symbolized despair were now gone, replaced by an open campus bathed in sunlight. Where barbed wire once stood as a barrier between freedom and captivity, lush greenery now flourished. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. What had been a place of suffering and corruption was reborn as a center for education, treatment, and rehabilitation. The infamous special room, where screams of torture had echoed through the nights, was now a library filled with books donated by citizens across Burkina Faso. Former prisoners browsed its shelves, their faces lighting up with curiosity and hope. The old kitchen, once a grimy space for preparing rotten food, had become a soup kitchen serving healthy meals prepared under hygienic conditions. And in the prison yard, laughter replaced despair as former inmates gathered to share stories of resilience and renewal. Bari, the towering figure who had once ruled cell block C7 with fear, now wore a clean uniform and worked as a health officer. His cold eyes, once hardened by years of survival, now softened when he spoke to others. "President Traore is coming today," Bari announced excitedly to the group of former inmates. "We must thank him." When Ibrahim Trare arrived, he wore simple clothes, just like the day he first entered Koa Prison, but his presence commanded respect. He walked among the crowd, shaking hands, listening intently, and offering words of encouragement. No longer disguised, no longer hiding, he stood as a leader who had emerged from the shadows of injustice to shine a light on humanity's potential for redemption. As Gaspar, the young man who had nearly died of untreated injuries, approached Traore, tears welled up in his eyes. "Mr. President," Gaspar said, his voice trembling, "you saved my life." Traore placed a hand on Gaspar's shoulder and shook his head gently. "No, Gaspar," he replied. "We saved each other's lives. A nation is only as strong as its weakest member." This exchange moved everyone present. For the first time, in years, these men felt seen, not as criminals or statistics, but as human beings worthy of dignity and care. Traore addressed the gathering, his tone warm yet resolute. A prison system, he began, is a mirror of a nation. Today, when we look into this mirror, we see pride instead of shame. We see strength instead of weakness. And most importantly, we see hope instead of despair. Applause erupted, but it wasn't the kind reserved for leaders on pedestals. It was heartfelt, emotional, and deeply personal. These men weren't applauding a ruler. They were embracing a brother. Later that evening, Trare sat down with Bari and several other former inmates. They shared stories about their past lives, their struggles, and their dreams for the future. One man spoke of wanting to reunite with his family. Another dreamed of opening a small business, and yet another expressed a desire to mentor troubled youth so they wouldn't end up in places like Koa. Listening intently, Trare realized something profound. True reform wasn't just about changing structures. It was about transforming hearts. By giving these men a second chance, he was also giving society a brighter future, but there was still work to be done. Warden Cabaret and his accomplices faced fair trials, ensuring accountability for their crimes. Some guards received sentences, while others underwent retraining programs to align them with the new vision of justice. Every step forward came with challenges, but Trare remained steadfast. In an interview months later, Trare reflected on his experience at Koa Prison. "Real power," he said, "is protecting the weak. Real leadership is feeling the pain of your people. And real freedom comes when there is justice for all." His words resonated far beyond Burkina Faso. Across Africa, and even globally, the story of Ibrahim Trare's 6 days in Koa Prison became a beacon of hope. It reminded nations that no one, not even those behind bars, should ever be forgotten. As Trare stood outside the newly transformed rehabilitation center, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and gold, he turned to a journalist accompanying him. "What's next?" she asked. Trare smiled faintly, his gaze steady. "Reform doesn't stop here," he said. "It spreads everywhere." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the newly transformed rehabilitation center, Ibrahim Trare stood amidst the crowd of former prisoners, guards, and officials. The air was thick with emotion, hope, gratitude, and even tears. This place, once a symbol of despair, had become a beacon of redemption and renewal. It wasn't just a physical transformation. It was a testament to what humanity could achieve when courage met compassion. Trare's journey into Koa Prison had started as a mission to uncover the truth, but it ended as something far greater, a movement that would ripple across Burkina Faso and beyond. His 6 days behind bars weren't just about exposing corruption. They were about restoring dignity to those who had been forgotten. "Real power," Trare had said earlier that day, "is protecting the weak. Real leadership is feeling the pain of your people, and real freedom comes when there is justice for all." These words resonated deeply, not only with those present, but with everyone who heard the story. Across Africa, and even globally, the tale of Ibrahim Trare's daring infiltration became a symbol of hope. It reminded nations that no one, regardless of their circumstances, should ever be abandoned or erased from society's conscience. The Kotoka incident marked more than the end of a corrupt prison system. It ignited a reform movement that spread like wildfire. Warden Cabaret and his accomplices faced fair trials, ensuring accountability for their crimes. But the true victory lay in the lives touched by the reforms. Former inmates like Bari and Gaspar found purpose again, working to uplift others who had walked the same dark path. For Trare, this was just the beginning. As he turned to leave the rehabilitation center, he paused for a moment, gazing at the faces around him. They weren't just former prisoners, they were survivors, dreamers, and builders of a brighter future. "Reform doesn't stop here," he told a journalist accompanying him. "It spreads everywhere." And spread it did. From Burkina Faso's borders to international forums, the story of Koa Prison inspired leaders and citizens alike. It challenged them to confront injustices within their own systems and reminded them that change starts with empathy. This story of courage, resilience, and redemption is proof that one person can make a difference, but together we can transform the world. If this story moved you, share it with others. Let's continue the conversation about justice, equality, and humanity. Hit like, subscribe, and comment below. What steps can we take to ensure no one is left behind? Because every nation is only as strong as its weakest member.